Hi, LinkedIn friends. I am so happy to see you here today. I feel really fortunate. I'm Dorie Clark. I'm here with my good friend, Martin Lindstrom. And Martin and I, hi, Martin. We spoke last week at this time, and we had such a great conversation. We were talking about Martin's new book, which is called Biology, B-U-Y, Ology for a Coronavirus World. And it was such a fantastic conversation that we decided that we would reconvene in a week, which is now today, to talk about another pressing issue that is impacting a lot of marketers, a lot of corporations, which is, as we all know, the world, not just because of the pandemic, although that's part of it, has been in a lot of upheaval over the past couple of months and especially the past couple of weeks. And so these are important conversations and also tricky things for brands to navigate. So Martin and I wanted to talk more about that. I would like to ask you in our audience, we are so happy to have you here. Please go ahead and type into the chat box who you are, where you're from. We would love to see you so we can call out and say hi. And as you're doing that, Martin, I wanted to start with a question. When we talked last week, you mentioned that right like a couple of days before that, so just about a week ago, you were in a gathering, a conclave of chief marketing officers. Just to set the tenor, what are they talking about? Martin is one of the world's leading branding authorities. He works with many Fortune 500 companies. You were talking with the people at the top of their game. What is on their mind and what are they thinking about right now?
Do you know what? This situation is crazy, and there's multiple aspects to this. First of all, they're walking from one crisis to another. I mean, they're going through the whole COVID-19, and it's bumped straight into the Black Lives Matter issue. And the issue they have is that it has two different dimensions. The first one is that they want to behave and act in a really good way. They want to say to the world, hey, of course we support this whole issue. Of course we want to see a change happening. But what they're also saying is, and this is what's so fascinating, is that behind the scenes, some of those companies are representing hundreds, 2, 3, 4, 500,000 staff. And they have multiple challenges internally. One challenge is, for example, that they have offices around the world in areas where not necessarily this topic is relevant, believe it or not. They have offices where there's clear opinions against it. And they also have the issue about how they're going to behave when some of their clients and customers, in fact, have a completely different opinion around this. So the marketeers' biggest problem right now is not necessarily what they want to do, because I think it's straightforward what they want to do. They need to get a whole organization with them, and that organization is not aligned. So quite often they end up in this political internal mess where they're trying to figure out what opinions should we have. And even worse, everyone is stuck behind a computer screen. So they can't even sit down and have a chat and come to an agreement. No, they have to do it in a structured way throughout the whole world. So really, there was an enormous amount of frustration going on. And that frustration, I think it's really a reflection of the fact that they don't have their house in order. They haven't made up their opinion. They've never been forced to make up their opinion. And now from one day to another, it kind of is a must. You need to go out and show your flag. And if you don't do it, by the way, then you're not part of this whole thing. And therefore, you'll be seen as a brand which is just not standing up for something it should stand up for. So it's a super tricky situation right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for laying that out, Martin. And we have some wonderful friends who are here in town. We have Mark and Benita from San Francisco.
Mark and Benita.
Yeah, our good pals. We have Rod from Jordan. We have Andrew from North Carolina. Lance is here from Texas. Steve from New Jersey. Susan's in from London. Christian from Littleton, Colorado. We've got Joseph from Zambia. Benjamin from Mozambique. Tristan from Toronto. We have so many cool folks. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome, everyone.
Yeah. So, Martin, a question that I have for you, just to sort of start chronologically with all of these things here. When the pandemic started, a tricky question for marketers, which I heard from a lot of people, was, look, we know this is a sensitive time. People are scared. People may be losing their jobs. They may be ill. Their family may be ill. And yet, as a company, we need to sell things. How do we do it in a way that doesn't look crass or doesn't look
Yeah.
exploitive. How would a marketer navigate something like that?
I think actually, in the end of the day, what we've learned works the best is to be sincere and honest and really hold off pushing messages unless it fits perfectly into the narrative. And I have to say, I'll give you an example of what is perfect in the narrative. When the Hurricane Katrina and other hurricanes were swiping out parts of the US, P&G had that tied big trucks running, and they would send them out to the local community with washing machines and whatever in it, and they would give free detergent and a free wash to everyone. That is where things are part of the narrative. On one hand, they're helping the local community. On the other hand, they're also making sure they're conveying a brand message which is in the right context. But if you start to push messages down the throat of consumers where it's out of context or where it feels like you have an agenda you're playing, hold off. Really hold off. Instead, I would rather go the opposite way and use this as an opportunity to really show a sense of empathy. And I think that the best way to illustrate that is that if you are able to use this downtime period, the period where you really can't push a conventional brand message, and you actually are able to build your brand by doing something good, I think quite often that it's going to be a winner. And I can tell you tons of different cases where brands really have done that, where they basically are saying, hey, it was a case in Australia where a family couldn't get home. And a local airline company basically said, hey, we want to transport you to come home and whatever. And they helped the person. And that story really blew the media very quickly. That's a story where an airline company is pushing the message indirectly, doing promotion indirectly. And I think that's really the only path you can take. So stay away from the commercial messages. And my most important advice to all of you guys out there, skip your entire marketing budget. Just kill the marketing budget. Use those money to offer better customer service, because it's in time of need, people really need some support. I think Zappos is a great example. I mean, the other day there was an article in the New York Times talking about how one Zappos customer calling into this line, and for those of you guys who are not familiar with Zappos, Zappos was and is a shoe company acquired recently by Amazon, but this company, well known for its extremely good service, basically had a case where a customer called in and they were on the line for 11 hours just talking about the life, right? And as the article in the New York Times is talking about, in reality, quite often people just called in regarding one topic, but actually just wanted to talk. And that, I believe, is also a way to build a brand, because you're helping people in need. And I tend to say it's when people in need, you build your brand.
Yeah, that's really powerful, Martin. So yeah, key takeaway here from Martin: kill your marketing budget, use it on something else, use it on better customer service and reaching out to the stakeholders and the people who are affected. I think that's powerful. We want to give a shout out to, please, if you're joining, type in, tell us where you're from. Deirdre is here from Buenos Aires, Swapna from Virginia, Edgardo from Peru, Maria from Brooklyn, Claudia from Milano. We're so happy to have you guys. So Martin, a question that came in from Chris. I think a lot of people can relate to this. I was seeing in the chat box, people are like, yeah, we want to know the answer to this. Chris says, it seems like everyone ends up sending out the same message. I guess this is around, Black Lives Matter, but also he says we saw this a lot with COVID. The message sadly gets a bit tired or seems inauthentic. How do you get ahead of this? What would be your take around this, so that it just doesn't sound like one more person saying like, oh, here's the obligatory thing?
Do you know what? I really wanted to give you an answer which is perfect and which you can implement straight away. I have some really bad news for you. This preparation have to begin much earlier than in the last minute, where a topic is hitting the waves and everyone is jumping on it. And here's the way I would go about it. First of all, you as an organization have some core brand values. Are they strong enough is my first question. I mean, one of the clients we have, it's a supermarket chain, and they have a brand value which is wit, humor, right? They also have courageous as another brand value. Now, what supermarket chain do you know which have those values? I don't know any other. So what the first thing you have to do is to identify brand values which are not the standard. Every supermarket chain in the whole world typically would have low prices, lots of products, good customer service, quality, the roll drill. But very few, if any, have something standing out. So you need to go back to the foundation of your brand and ask yourself, what are the core values you really want to have which stands out from the crowd? That's point number one. Point number two is to go one step further. And that's where to say, okay, what do I want to be well known for in the future? And then plot out a strategy for that. You really need to stand out from the crowd. And this is where the Black Lives Matter comes into play. Because there's three different ways you can attack that particular problem or that challenge. You can either choose to tick the lower part of the pyramid. That is where you say, I recognize there's an issue, we support it, but I'm not going to go out and do the full thing, right? The second layer is where you say, you recognize the issues and we want to do something with it, we want to support it, but we're not going to make it the one and only thing we want to stand for. And then last point, the top of the pyramid is where I'm going to say, this is the number one topic we want to stand for, and everything we do across every touch point needs to align around this. Now, I don't think a lot of companies have made up their mind in terms of this topic and all the other topics. Some of them not as important as this one because it's a very important topic, but I don't think they made up their mind. So you need to say, okay, core brand values, what is the number one thing I want to focus on? And then you're ready for the storm to hit. And of course, you can't predict everything happening, but I can guarantee you one thing. The virus we've seen is going to come back, okay? I bet you we're going to see a Black Lives Matter issue going to happen, perhaps not in this format, but in another format. And we're going to have other similar issues like the gay and lesbian issues, marriage equality, the Me Too movement, all those different things are going to happen. So you as a company you better have to prepare yourself for it because it's going to happen. And this is the biggest problem with companies today. Companies today are riding from one crisis to another. So they literally don't have a single time where there is just calmness out there and you can go out and communicate whatever you want. Forget about it. It's gone those days. And I would actually claim that we are in a situation right now where brands over the next 2, 3, 4 years will never have a quiet period again. They're going to ride from one crisis to another. So you better go back to the foundation. And why is that so important? Because once you've signed off those brand values and the whole organization have signed them off, you don't need to run around the whole organization and secure a mandate all the time and get permissions because that permission have already been given up front. So once you've done that, that's where you can come up with really edgy messages rather than we support this issue, we're donating $100,000, whatever, because frankly, fine. But is it going to change the world? Not really.
Yeah, I think that's very powerful, Martin, the realization that these things have to be handled upstream, that if a company is just constantly in reactive mode, they're gonna end up screwing things up or making mistakes because they're trying to make decisions in 20 minutes that should be made way, way before that. So thank you for that. We have new folks joining us. This is wonderful. Cleo from Montreal. We have Barbara from California. Terry's here from Atlanta. This is great. Hi, Peter in Ecuador. Hello. Annette from Solana Beach. This is great. Yvonne from Barcelona. Nestor from Brazil. I love all of our international friends here. Please feel free, if you are enjoying this conversation, hit share so that other people on LinkedIn can see it and be exposed to it as well. And I will just mention to you guys so as I alluded to before, Martin and I had a conversation last week. If you're enjoying this, you might like to check that out as well. And my trusty assistant, John, can type that into the chat box right now so that you can see that and get that YouTube link of our replay. So Martin, to the point that you just raised, we had a great question that came in from Karen T. She wants to know, do brands sometimes need crisis management PR teams for cultural sensitivity? Like how?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because they're burning their fingers right now. Here's the issue. I want to put this into perspective, okay? So I work with all sorts of different clients, and one of our clients is a royal family. I think you know about that. Don't want to put a name on it. You can guess. And we work with the royal family for quite some time. And I will never forget this. One day I had a workshop with the whole family, 3 generations. I went into the room and the royal leader came out. I won't say if it's a he or she, because then I think you'll guess who it is. So I the royal leader came out and said to me during the break, listen, you had to remember, Mr. Lindstrom, very formal, right? Said, Mr. Lindstrom, you had to remember one thing. We are not a listed company with a quarterly earning every third month. We don't need to show those short-term results. We don't even need to show midterm results which is after 1 or 2 or 3 years. We are a lifetime brand. And if you do a good job, basically your good job is proven by the fact that we have one happy family over an entire span of a lifetime. So that's your horizon when you work with us. We are a lifetime brand. We don't care about the short and midterm, we care about the long term. The issue we have right now is that companies are extraordinarily short-term focused, typically based on quarterly announcements. And that means that there's no interest in taking long or midterm goals and have them in front of you, which means that if we have a Black Lives Matter issue, even though the person sitting in charge of the organization actually believe, of course, we need to address this in a positive way, then that person is afraid of the ramifications with the shareholders, with the stock market, all this stuff. And not only that, that is one thing, but throughout the entire organization, you also have a problem. Because guess what? The bonus systems every employee is tied up with is based on an annual report, an annual bonus coming out of this. And if you have a dip, my summer holiday is going to be not as good. And that house I was dreaming of is going to be tiny. And by the way, the superannuation, the 401k is going to not be as good. So what's happening is that entire organization is locked into a gridlock. Okay. And that is the problem we have right now, that you need to adopt a long-term perspective from now on. So here's the good news. If you are a privately held company, you will notice that you actually do have the control of short versus long time. And I met this wonderful person the other day who said, listen, in this particular issue, we made the decision. And there was some people in the organization which I know was against it. They were simply against it. And for the first time ever, I sat down, this person said, and I said, bloody hell, let's get rid of them. Once and for all, let's just focus on what we fundamentally believe is right as a family. And so my message to you is, you in charge of marketing or whoever you are out there, remember one thing. I don't think this is a matter about you doing a quick campaign these days. I think it's a matter about you creating somewhat of a legacy at the moment. And I think you need to go much further than you normally would do. And I think it's time for you to step up and really show a strong drive throughout the organization to navigate this particular issue. Because if you don't do it, you'll just leave it like a bad heritage to the next person coming on board, fixing the same broken problems one more time. And if you don't do it, here's the issues on the Black Lives Matter, which I think is really fascinating insight. By 2032, basically half of the US population will be Black in terms of consumption. Right? Think about that matter, right? That's pretty extraordinary. That means what CEO wouldn't say, well, listen, 12 years from now, and half of the population is going to be a potential customer to me. What CEO wouldn't say, well, then we better get our ship in order? That is because it's a long-term perspective, right? But we don't have that. We're thinking 3 months ahead all the time. And yes, in that little microcosm, it's true what the prophet is saying. But the long term, I believe that the royal family is right. We have to be looking at this from a long-term perspective, right?
Yeah, thank you for that, Martin. I think that's really interesting. And for folks who may be interested, Martin and I both have LinkedIn newsletters. And Martin wrote a really interesting piece actually a week or two ago about these questions about Black Lives Matter and how it ties in, how marketers can respond. And I want to ask you about that in a minute, Martin. But first, I'm going to ask my lovely assistant, John, to type that link into the chat box, if you don't mind, John. And that way, if you are interested, you can read Martin's article. You can also subscribe to Martin's newsletter. All you have to do is when you go to that link, you click the subscribe button and you can do that. And I will mention for you guys as well, if you are interested in subscribing to my newsletter, there's a special link. You can go to dorieclark.com/LinkedIn and just open a new window, do that, and you can subscribe. Click the blue subscribe button to my newsletter, and you also can follow John's link to subscribe to Martin's. So Martin, to that point, I wanted to ask you about this. You quoted a friend of yours in your newsletter article. This was a friend of yours who had been quoted in the New York Times, and basically what she had said was, "Hey, companies, if you don't have anything tangible to show, basically just shut up."
Yeah.
So talk about that. How do we
Well,
think about
I
that?
was quoting Wendy Lipman, and Wendy is a retail expert based out of New York City as well. And Wendy's so right. Shout out to Wendy if you're on the line right now, because here's the issue. Don't talk bullshit. Seriously. I mean, I'm sick and tired of people and companies pretending like they stand for something, and then you scratch the surface and there's just veneer underneath. I think that the younger generation, the millennials, get it. I mean, seriously, they know when things are fake. They know when things are shallow because they're used to looking through. They have this X-ray pair of glasses, right? They can look through it. They can see when it's not true and when it's true. And I think the older generation, at least me, Dorie, you are the younger generation, of course, but at least the older generation, me, I would say that we probably live in some sort of naive world, believing that we can seduce the world to believe in something which is not true. Stop it, for God's sake. So my opinion is very simple. If you can't go full blown into the matter, just shut up. Just don't try to pretend, and then use those resources on something else which is good. Okay, don't just take them in and cast them out to shareholders. No, use them on something which really creates a point of differentiation. And all that, remember, comes down to the core brand values you have and the purpose of your organization, right?
Yeah, thank you. That's great, Martin. Rod has an interesting question that I just wanted to turn to. Rod wants to know, Martin, what are your thoughts about communicating on sensitive issues from a personal brand perspective rather than perhaps a corporate brand perspective? If you are somebody that has, a high profile, or at least a higher profile, because, frankly, that's many people now, given social media. Everybody has a little bit of a platform. How would you think about handling things if you're not Coca-Cola or Pepsi, but instead you're Martin or you're Dorie or you're Rod?
Well, listen, there's sort of two answers to it, Rod. If you are working in a company under a company brand, it's one answer. And if it's Rod is the brand, it's a different story. So let's take the latter first. You are a personal brand. Remember, everyone is a brand. And you need to do me three favors, okay? The first thing is, Rod, think about what is the one word you want to stand for. So let me give you an example. If I let's take the car industry, okay? If I say in the car industry there's one car brand which owns the word safety, okay? What car brand would that be? You probably would say Volvo, right? If I take in any category one word which is search, I'm sure you will say Google, right? If I say magic, you'll say Disney. What's your one word? The starting point for you is to own one word. Then to figure out what are the things you can do which is aligned with that one word, and don't navigate outside that particular space. Think about Volvo. Volvo was the first company in the world to invent the three-point seatbelt in 1959. And they did that by employing an engineer from the Swedish Air Force into Volvo in Sweden, in Gothenburg. And because of that, they basically owned that idea. They were the first to invent the airbags in the side of the car. They're the first to invent, and I still hate them for this, the seat belt alarm, right? But the reality is what they did was one by one, they ticked the boxes of owning one single word, which is safety. And in fact, this year, Volvo announced officially that they will not have a single person dying or being seriously injured in a Volvo car from this year. That's a statement which the legal department will hate you for life saying, but that's literally what Volvo is saying to the world right now. They own one word. What's your one word? That's my question. And once you have that, then you can go out and be fairly safe of saying what you believe. Why? Because here's the reality. You cannot be good friends with everyone. And in fact, I don't want to encourage you to be good friends with everyone. Dorie is the only exception where I think everyone loves her. That's not the case with me.
Not,
Okay,
not,
so I
not
apologize.
even, but thank you, Martin.
That's the reason why I'm in black here, right? Okay. But the reality is you cannot be good with everyone. You can't be good friends with everyone. And actually, you don't want to do that, because if you try to be good friends with everyone, guess what? You will water out your brand. You won't have an edge. You won't stand for anything which people really will remember you for. So you need to be somewhat polarizing. And if you are that within your safe space you defined, then you have enough expertise to navigate these really muddy waters. If you go outside, it's dangerous because you don't have the credibility in the public's eye to navigate around that stuff, and that's where you'll collapse. Now, the first part of my question was, if you operate in a company under a company banner and you're going out with your personal opinion, don't do it. Just don't do it, because you are most likely jeopardizing your brand, and you're most likely jeopardizing the company's brand, and most likely you'll be fired. So just don't do it for now. It may be this situation will change soon, but at least for now, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. I think this is marvelous. And this is why I really wanted to talk to you about this, because I feel like you are one of the smartest and savviest minds around these branding issues. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with all this. We had a question come in with from our friend Ron Carucci. I believe you know Ron too. He's a fellow colleague from the Marshall Goldsmith 100 coaches. Ron wants to know, how does a brand balance genuinely contributing to a difficult issue and that contribution with running the risk of shameless self-promotion with humble brags? He says, so many recent brand campaigns are focused on telling everyone the good they are doing. How do you strike a balance?
Listen, that's a fantastic question. And my answer is super simple. Talk to the audience, talk to the consumers, talk to the customers, and ask them what they think. I always recommend doing that. That if you have a really touchy topic, invite 10 of them into your office, or if you are allowed to with COVID-19 or whatever we are in, then go to them and have a chat and tell them about what you are planning to do and hear their honest feedback. Do it uncover, by the way, undercover. So if you avoid telling where you're coming from, but just saying, hey, and here's another brand was planning to do this, what would your opinion be? And what you would realize is you will hear the truth incredibly fast. And once you hear the truth, you know if you're on the right track or on the wrong track. I think sometimes we are seduced by the thought that we can do all this stuff on our own in our own little office with a computer screen to the rest of the world. I think nothing could be further from the truth. This is an incredibly sensitive topic we're in right now, and there's so many emotions we need to navigate. We don't know the backstories to all those emotions. So I want to spend time in consumers' lives, in their homes. And Dorie, you know my life, but I spent time in more than 2,500 consumer homes across more than 80 countries to understand the psychology of how we live and how we behave and what brands can and cannot do. And you know what? I would claim one thing. If I can do it, you can do it. I mean, we're all busy individuals, but in the end of the day, who's paying your salary? It's not me. It's the customer.
Absolutely. Amen to that, Martin. This has been a fantastic conversation. Guys, if you have enjoyed this conversation, first of all, thank you for being here and for participating with your great comments and interaction. If you've enjoyed this, please hit the share button so that other friends on LinkedIn can see it. If you are interested in learning more from Martin, hold on, I'm enamored of this new functionality. You can go to martinlindstrom.com. Look at that. You can download. Oh, it's so huge. It's amazing. You can download Martin's wonderful new ebook, which is Biology for a Coronavirus World. And if you are interested in keeping in touch with me, you can do that at dorieclark.com. You can download my free self-assessment, sign up for the email list, and you will be briefed on upcoming LinkedIn Lives so that you don't miss a thing. Martin Lindstrom, any parting words from you?
Dorie, what are you thinking about this whole topic? You've been quiet. You're asking these amazing questions. What is your opinion about this topic? What's your opinion about Black Lives Matter and what brands should do? Are you in agreement with what I'm saying, or am I totally off?
I think you are spot on. I wanted to hear your thoughts. I mean, first of all, I come out of a background as a journalist, so my default mode is asking questions. But and I was excited to hear what you think. But I think that you're really right. That ultimately, what I think we all know, I mean, to the point where you almost have to use air quotes to say it, that authenticity is an important thing. Of course, that's an important thing. But I think while people appreciate authenticity, they are disgusted by authenticity. And it's become this sort of performative thing sometimes. And so ultimately, so much more is in the doing rather than in the saying. And so I think that if we can really ask important questions, you know, it looks strange. It looks like you're trying too hard if you are going so far out of your swim lane and, you know, saying these things that like, well, where is that coming from? And, you know, we've never heard that before, and that doesn't seem to be backed by any kind of action. But if you can find ways that align with what your brand is and does and has always does, has always done, what are the core principles, and create positive ways of engaging moving forward that are in alignment with that, then it's doing something that actually is authentic rather than a performative authenticity.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's my time to say amen. Absolutely, you're spot on. And by the way, I've just been told right now that my next LinkedIn article about this topic is highly provocative. So I warn all of you guys. In fact, maybe you shouldn't read it, but it's going live in 2 hours from now on. So
look at somebody who understands marketing.
Oh, what do you mean?
Don't read this. No, you don't want to read that.
It's seriously provocative. But listen, I want to express my opinion about this topic. It is super important, and it has to be addressed now. We can't go another round before it's being addressed. That's my honest opinion about it, right?
Amen, brother. So last call, open a new window for yourself, open a new window, follow me on LinkedIn, follow Martin on LinkedIn so you can check out our new posts and stay apprised with Martin's highly controversial new offering. And we are so happy to have all of you guys here. Martin, thank you for your time, my friend.
Pleasure. Thank you.